The Mazda MX-5 needs no introduction, is part of that category of affordable fun cars that we all know. We dream of Paganis and Koenigseggs, but our bank accounts end up buying MX-5s and GTIs. This car is a legend, it's mythical. People like them so much that on online forums you'll find people who only half-jokingly say that Miata actually stands for Miata is always the answer. So when you're asking for advice on which car to buy, they'll always direct you towards this. Do you live alone and are looking for a fun car? Miata. Do you have a child? Well, child seat and Miata. Do you move furniture around daily for work? Well, quit and buy a Miata. Have you got 3 wives and 14 kids? Just get 9 Miatas and all your life issues will be solved. But testing cars that are so well liked is very complicated because the standards are 10 Miatas high. Still, can this 2-seater convertible live up to its expectations? We'll see in this video. Let's dive a little bit into history of the MX-5. The MX-5 is a car of multiple identities, and not just because it's called MX-5 here in Europe, Eunos Roadster in Japan, and Miata in the US, but rather because the audience it targets has changed over the years. The first generation Miata, called the NA, which you can so easily tell apart by its pop-up headlights, was not a car for petrolheads. It was a hairdresser's car, as it was so stereotypically called. A car for non-enthusiasts, for people who were just looking for a cheap 2-seater convertible. Essentially the same audience that targets the Fiat 500C nowadays, for instance. Then came the NB and NC generations, which targeted essentially the same audience. But in the late 2000s, something happened. As first-generation Miatas turned almost 20 years old, car enthusiasts started buying them as their values fell through the floor. Now, these early Miata fans were not interested in the car, they just wanted mainly a disposable, very cheap convertible, and that was it. And when they bought these cars, they realized something incredible. Those first Miatas were fantastic cars. And so they started buying them more and more, and their values started climbing back up. The Japanese brand took note of this, and in 2014 they presented this car, the ND, the 4th generation Miata. This is the first Miata that was designed from the get-go to target those car enthusiasts, to target people who are looking for a sporty car that was not simply another front-wheel drive hatchback, who wanted a car not to go from point A to point B, but rather a car that they could drive on a Sunday morning on a mountain road. But we car enthusiasts are a very hard crowd to please. We complain about everything. If the car is manual, if the car is automatic, if the car is too heavy, if the car is too light, if the car has a turbo engine, or if the car has a naturally aspirated engine, we'll complain either way. Some say that we don't know what we want, but we actually do. We want a 550 horsepower transformer car that can go from a sports car to a family hatchback that has a V8 engine but has the fuel consumption of a hybrid and costs fewer than $15,000 when new. And to be fair, when the people at Mazda presented this car at first, they were a little bit scared. What would these people think, the prospective buyers? Would they like it or would they not? And against all odds, petrolheads loved them. There's not a single person on earth who does not like this car. Everyone loves them. This seems to be almost the perfect car. If you're enjoying this video as much as I'm enjoying myself filming this car, may I suggest that you subscribe? This is a new channel for me and it helps a lot with YouTube further recommending my videos. Thank you. So going over the powertrain of this car has a 2-liter, 4-cylinder, 16-valve naturally aspirated engine that sends 160 horsepower to the rear wheels via a 6-speed manual gearbox and a limited slip differential, which is great if you actually want to drive. At least here in Europe, there's also a 1.5-liter engined version. This unit is different from the typical Miata in that it is an RF. The RF has this sort of targa roof over here and these 2 pillars that make it look more like a coupe when the roof is up, like this. It also has a retractable hardtop, which you're seeing in action right now. This hardtop actually adds 40 kilos to its weight, making it weigh 1,100 kilograms in total. That's why when it comes to style and when it comes to weight, I actually prefer the normal version of the MX-5. So let's talk a little bit about this car's weakest point, which I actually think it's the interior. When it comes to the equipment that this unit has, it's got keyless entry and keyless start, which means you can just walk into a car by pressing this button to lock and unlock, as long as you have the keys in your pocket. These leather seats I actually love. I love this color as well. It's got Bose stereo all throughout the car. Inside you find cruise control, sat nav, just one zone automatic climate control, heated seats, which is very useful when you're with a top down like right now, start stop button, automatic headlights, automatic wipers, and all the typical assortment of driver aids that you get in a modern car. Cool extra that you can actually disable stability and traction control by pressing this button, which is readily available. That's not something that you see in a lot of cars today. You get one touch on both windows, but only to go down, not to go up. Interior quality in general is good. This leather is fairly good quality. The plastics inside are not that good, especially on some of the surfaces that you touch on a regular basis. The heated seat buttons are not that good. The climate controls are not that good either. And well, in general, all the surfaces that you touch are poor quality plastic, but it's what you expect in a car of this price, especially Japanese cars that usually tend to use cheaper but very durable plastic. Anyway, let's go for a drive, which is what you're all expecting me to do. Now, this car is a solid 10 out of 10 when it comes to driving. Everything is perfect. The feeling of the steering wheel, the way it drives, the throttle response, the gear shifter, the ergonomics, how everything is designed around you. The way the hood shows you exactly where both front wheels are. Everything is perfect. And this version with 160 horsepower, there's no power missing, which was a problem with the early Miatas. Now there's something I should note. A meter and 83 centimeters tall, which is essentially a 6-footer, and that's the limit for this car. If I were a few centimeters, a few inches taller, there's no way I could fit in here. And it's actually the first time that, being my height, I actually feel a little bit cramped in a car. But there's one place where this car really shines, which is twisty mountain roads, and that's exactly where we're going. Man, this car is actually really twitchy, and not in a I'm about to lose control kind of way, but in an actually fun way. You can actually hear the exhaust a lot. There's one way I can describe this car. I consider myself a fairly fortunate person. I've been able to drive classic cars from the 90s, from the 80s, from the 60s. And of all the modern cars I've driven, I think this car is the one that gives me a feeling that's closest to that of a classic car. And I mean that as a compliment. This is incredibly fun to drive. This simply blows any front-wheel drive hatchback out of the water. This is something else, something completely different. We need to talk about the MX-5's evil cousin, the Fiat 124 or the Abarth 124, or perhaps this is the evil cousin of the 124. The 124 is the MX-5 that still targets its original audience. It's pretty much the same car except for the engine, which in the case of the Fiat has a 1.4 liter turbo engine with 140 horsepower or 180 something, I think, in the Abarth. But it's interesting to mention that car because it was the Fiat that made this Mazda possible. Fiat paid for almost all the development and design of this car. It was still led by Sergio Marchionne, and they have commented on several occasions that this car wouldn't be possible if it weren't for the Fiat. So thank you, Fiat, for making this MX-5 possible. So come over here that I want to show you a few small design details of the MX-5. Well, first of all, you've got an old-fashioned, old-school antenna, not something that you have mounted on the windscreen, or of course you cannot have it mounted on the roof for obvious reasons. If you come here with me to the interior, you've got cup holders that you can actually take home if you want to do that for whatever reason. But I think the coolest thing in an MX-5 is the secret storage space. Now, where is said secret storage space? Perhaps you think I'm talking about this cubby here, which actually has a lock. No, that's not it. Perhaps this one here? No, that's not it either. You don't really have a glove box, so that's not gonna work. What you need to do is fold down the rear seat like that. Then you've got access to this. Another secret storage if you want to, I don't know, store money or documents or whatever kind of illegal substance you're carrying with you. Then you just fold down the rear seat again and you're good to go. Final design detail I want to talk about is the absurd length of the stock that allows you to reset the trip meter. Just look at the length of my finger, just how big this is. It's incredible. I can't believe it. There's no reason to make it this long, but okay, Mazda, that's cool. So to wrap things up, I think this MX-5 is a fantastic car. I came here with very high expectations and somehow this car has exceeded them. This is simply a great car, and there's a problem with that. It's that perhaps it is a bit too perfect. Would I buy this car? No, I wouldn't. Because if we're talking about the used car market and it came to spending the money on this car, I would go and buy a Z4 or a Boxster or any other German, highly depreciating car. They're faster, they've got better interiors, and they look better. And that's because everyone loves the Miata. It's such a fantastic car once again, and that means they don't depreciate. So on the contrary, it's actually a great car to buy new. Because you can buy this car and in 5 years it will depreciate half of what any other rival would. The thing with non-depreciating Japanese cars is something that happens to me all the time. I really like them, but I never end up buying them because I actually think they're a bit overpriced sometimes, whereas German cars tend to be underpriced. But if you're looking for a new car, I don't think you can get more fun than this. Why get a Mini or a Golf GTI? Seriously, if you can buy an MX-5, it makes no sense. There is a problem with that. This car requires you to have a second car. I mean, there are tons of people who live with a Miata as their daily driver and their only car, but I don't think that's feasible for most people. You can have this as your main car, your daily driver, so to say, but when it comes to actually traveling or taking friends around or doing actual shopping, you're going to need a second car. And if you're going to be traveling in that second car, it cannot be a beater, it cannot be a cheap car. It has to be at least as good in interior quality as the Miata. So in the end, this may be a 20-something euro car, a 2017 model like this one, but you need another 15 or 20,000 euro car in your garage already. So you need to be able to spend at least 45 or 50,000 euros in cars to be able to afford this Miata. And that's the problem with me, for instance. I drive the Mercedes Coupe that you saw in my previous video, and that car costs essentially as much as this car. But I cannot sell my Mercedes and buy this car as much as I would want to. But there's another reason why I think if you're able, you should buy one of these cars new. And that reason is that, first of all, you're encouraging manufacturers, brands to keep making cars like these. They care about customers that buy their cars new, not about the petrolhead that buys their cars when they're 10 years old. And when it comes to fun, I can say I've driven some pretty powerful and cool cars, and there are not many that can bring as much enjoyment as this car can. Seriously, there are cars that are maybe worth 10 times as much as this Miata, and they're still not as engaging and not as fun. So in the end, Miata is always the answer. Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to like it, comment, and subscribe for more content on this channel. Until next time.